Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. This is the Lois Wetzel Show, and I'm your host and executive producer, Lois Wetzel, coming to you live at 9 a.m. Central Time from Houston, Texas. This radio show is free all the time to my listeners. I have an archived audio library of spiritual and metaphysical teachings here, available free at any time of the day or night to everyone on earth with access to a computer. These shows are educational, and most of the time I'll be interviewing others who will be telling about what they know, the books they've written, or the spiritual work that they do. And sometimes I'll be the one doing the teaching, so please join us anytime, either live or later in the archives. I have a free email newsletter. To sign up for that, or just to read what's on my website, go to hotpinklotus.com. Also, I've published 2 books so far: Edina, Energy Medicine from the Stars, available on Kindle, and Akashic Records, Case Studies of Past Lives, available on Amazon and Kindle. The second book, Akashic Records, is about Akashic Records readings that I've done for other people and the effects of these readings on their lives. I'm still doing Akashic Records readings, so if you're interested, contact me. The call-in number for this show, if you want to make a comment or ask a question on the air, is 347-945-5309.
Well, good morning. Today is the 15th of March, 2013, and today I'm going to be reading to you from my most recent book, my 3rd book, recently released on Kindle and soon to be released on Amazon. And the title is Sacred Journeys and Vision Quest. I'm one of those people who loves to travel. It feeds my soul. And I've had some pretty mystical, awesome things happen on some of these trips. And I wanted to share that with people so that they could understand that such things can happen at sacred sites, but they can also happen in the most mundane way, like on a trip to the grocery store. But today I'm just going to read you bits from the book so you can get a taste of the flavor. I'm going to start with the introduction because it's short and it gives context. More of us are awakening to the spiritual levels of life at this time, no longer solely tending to the surface levels of existence. Symbolic, mystical, or numinous events are being acknowledged more frequently and by larger numbers of people. This changes our entangled group consciousness and our collective mental health. As individuals, our experience of the divine happens most often while we are alone, including during meditation. I have learned from experience that mystical events occur spontaneously and in a variety of ways. One may be profoundly touched by spirit on an ordinary day, for example, on a trip to the grocery store, or it might be that a sacred experience presents itself during a hopeful trip to a known spiritual site. This book relates some of those as well. There are people who define the latter as a vision quest, journeys undertaken with the hope of having a spiritual experience. Vision quests also include any technique utilized to allow the individual to experience non-ordinary states or visions, including the use of entheogens. One thing is certain here. Spiritual experiences unfold in their own way, take us by surprise, and are not under the purview of any human being, not a spiritually themed travel guide, nor a guru, a priest, a minister, or any other leader. Both a miracle and a gift, every moment of life is sacred whether we recognize it or not. Our immortal souls intentionally incarnate in physical bodies on this planet to learn and grow from experiences garnered here. Some incidents stand out as special, and those are the awake moments, the events which exhibit the numinous and leave us feeling we interacted with the divine, experienced a miracle, or have been contacted by spirit. Every journey, no matter the length, is sacred, and every moment has the potential to be life-changing depending upon how we choose to react to our experiences. Can we see beyond the obvious to acknowledge the spiritual in our lives? Do we note the symbols, omens, and signs which surround us, gifting us with information or heralding what comes? When we are thus awake, are we on a sacred journey every day of our lives? I hold that we are. I relate below a series of tales, arranged chronologically, things which actually happened to me and to others in which I believe spiritual contact was made. My intent in offering these examples is so that others may begin to recognize or receive confirmation regarding those times when they have been similarly touched. This is a travel journal as well. If you love to travel, this book is also for you. I'm going to scroll down a bit. I'm reading from a Word program. Okay, crop formations and pyramids. In July of 2011, I flew to London, England, and then on west to the countryside by bus, where the crop formations occur each summer in the fields of grain. Some have been proven man-made, and some are of, quote, other origin, unquote, utilizing technology which human beings at this time do not possess. Many scientists and mathematicians have spent countless hours studying the phenomenon, and still no one knew where the authentic formations originated. They seem often to be teaching us complicated mathematics which humanity did not previously know. What's more, the authentic formations responded to human consciousness. If a group or sometimes an individual meditated upon seeing a formation that speaks to them, often the formation comes in the next day or two. For example, a group of Japanese tourists meditated upon getting a formation acknowledging their presence at the scene, and a crop formation that looked eerily like origami showed up the next day. I had been interested in this phenomenon, reading about them, watching them on the Internet each year as they were reported, and sending out newsletter emails about them for over 13 years. Finally, I was going to England hoping to actually see them myself and to walk into at least one and feel the energies there. I also wanted to be able to see Glastonbury on the tour during the trip if time and funds permitted. Unfortunately, that year they did not. After a few days in the UK, I planned heading south to visit the newly discovered pyramids in Europe located in Visoko, Bosnia. My guides were telling me to hang loose and watch the trip unfold rather than plan it in great detail. So I left, taking a deep breath, and hung on for the ride, trusting my guides to know what came next. Okay, I'm going to move down to the next place. Oh, and on my way, as I was leaving, on my day of departure, my good friend Terry Lee, who was back in Houston, drove me to the airport. Mercury was at the time retrograde, so I wanted to leave in plenty of time, and we did. I had earplugs, Benadryl for sleep, and eye covers. I was hoping not to need a book to read since I planned to sleep most of the time, so as to avoid jet lag as much as possible. Before Terry got there to take me to the airport, I was watering the plants one last time, having arranged for a friend to do that while I was gone, and lining my bags up outside the front door. I kept hearing the phrase, West Kennett, Long Barrow, West Kennett, Long Barrow, over and over and over until I finally said aloud, okay, I get it, hush already. To which the invisible speaker said, will you go there? Do you promise? I promised that I would go, and that quieted the voice for a while. And I'm going to scan down here to where I'd seen my first crop circle. I've been up in a microlight, and then one day I decided I was going to go check out West Kennett Long Barrow. And here it is. The next morning, I walked a half mile or so up the lane from Lydiard House to the local bus stop. On the way, I noticed all the fruit growing along the roadway. Plums, apples, blackberries lined the entire way up the lane. A young man at the bus stop across the street told me the bus he was taking also went to the big Swindon station where I could catch a bus to Marlborough. There I planned to attend the Crop Circle Conference as Eggle, someone I had met out in the crop circles, had suggested. The bus across the way arrived first, so I boarded it. It snaked through the streets for about 20 minutes before arriving downtown. I asked the man on the bus where the big bus station was, and he said he would walk me there because it was complicated, and that was his stop anyway. He was right. I never would have found that by myself. Waiting for about 30 minutes, I then caught a bus to Marlborough. I wandered the small town until I found the correct building at the college. It was a beautiful old structure with gorgeous manicured gardens. And the lectures were expensive, but I decided to attend for that day anyway. Okay, I stayed for a little while. I'm going to summarize that for you. I stayed for a few hours, and then I decided to go on back to the crop circles. I walked back up to the main street where the bus stops were looking puzzled while trying to figure out which buses went to Avebury. And then I spied Eggle hanging out of one of the bus doors calling out to me. I didn't even recognize him at first. He told me this bus he was on was headed for Avebury. I hopped aboard and rode on out there, and Eggle explained how to walk to West Kennet Long Barrow from Avebury. After I arrived, I stepped off the bus and headed in the direction I thought he said the barrow was located. After walking quite a distance across the field with many megaliths in it and spending time meditating at the base of one of them which called to me, I asked a group of young men which way the barrow was. Unfortunately, the barrow was back in the direction from which I had just come. So, muttering to myself somewhat, I walked back in the original direction and found the path to the barrow. The distance to the barrow turned out to be what felt like about 5 miles away. I had to climb over turnstiles and walk and walk and walk. I became hungry. Fortunately, I had some trail mix in my backpack as well as plenty of water. Much of the walk was uphill. I was panting and my heart was beating wildly. I live at sea level, you see. When I got about halfway up the hill and noticed with delighted amazement that in a field off to my left there was another crop formation. Not one to pass up such a nice surprise, I put money in the farmer's donation box and walked up a tram line so as not to disturb the grain to the empty crop circle. It was the smallest one that I had seen by air the previous day. I hadn't photographed it at all because it seemed too small and insignificant. Now I certainly wished that I had. I lay down almost in the center of the circle because I was tired and my heart was pounding from all the hiking, first in the wrong direction for about a half an hour and back again, then uphill across pastures, over turnstiles for a very long time. As soon as I reclined, I closed my eyes and saw telepathically a circle of druids wearing white standing along the edge of the central circle. By that I mean I saw them in my mind's eye. They began chanting and toning, swaying slightly, and communicated to me that I was having a light body activation. It felt good, so I remained there for about 7 or 8 minutes until they were done. I started to get up and continue my trek to the barrow, and then I was told I could do that or I could remain a bit longer. I decided to continue to remain there, lying in the circle. And then I unexpectedly went out like a light. It was like the experience of losing consciousness during meditation or on a massage table. At those times, I have found that I've gone far, far away, having no idea where I had gone. 10 minutes or so later, when I came back to conscious awareness, I saw in my mind's eye that a woman from the circle of druids had come over and worked on me. She was speaking to me in a lilting language, which I somehow knew to be Gaelic. I understood what she was saying. I can't remember what she said now, except for the last thing, which was, "We worked with them too, you know." I knew by them she meant the Ankanash. My, how about that, I was thinking. The Druids worked with the Ankanash too. I got up slowly, feeling relaxed and refreshed, and realized that there were now other people in the crop formation, though none of them had stepped into the central circle where the Druids were surrounding me. They moved into the center after I got up. These other people from many different countries, I could hear by their accents, had remained kindly and respectfully quiet while I was lying there. I felt honored by their kindness. As I got up to leave, I wondered if this were the reason I'd been guided to West Kennet Long Barrow in the first place. Was I sent there for this light body activation? And did this mean that one of the things the crop formations were created for was to make an interdimensional portal so our ancestors could come through to work with us when we needed this? Was the formation small and insignificant because only certain people were invited there? I was told later that there was almost always a crop formation in that particular field each year. I pondered all this as I walked up the hill to the ancient burial chamber. I took a few photos of both the entrance and some of the lovely stones inside of which the 5,000-year-old walls were made. I also met a young couple with a new baby and photographed them with their own camera inside the barrow. It turned out really well. I enjoyed her smile as she looked at the sweet photo of the three of them. Returning to Avebury, I arrived at the Red Lion bus stop in plenty of time, riding back to Swindon in the upstairs of a double-decker bus over the driver's side. It gave me a good feel for what it might be like to drive on the left, and I began to believe that I might be able to do that one day. I arrived back in Swindon, taking a cab to Lydiard House for my last night. So that's the one that I wanted to read to you. And it was, I headed out for London to see crop circles because I was pretty sure that that was going to be a powerful experience. And yet the most powerful experience was in the smallest crop circle of all, such a small one that I didn't even bother to photograph it from the air, and I probably photographed about 14 or 15 crop circles from the air. And if you would like to see the images from that trip, you can go to hotpinklotus.blogspot.com, and there are a lot of photographs there from that trip. And if you want to read the book, Sacred Journeys and Vision Quest, you can find that on Amazon. And, if you want to see all the books, all my books, you can go to Amazon.com and type my name into the search engine, and all the books show up. Lois Wetzel, Loiswetzel. We have a few more minutes, and what I'm going to do is just find a spot and start reading. Let's see. Okay, I'm in the I'm in Bosnia, visiting the pyramids there, and they were discovered in 2007, I believe, covered with earth, like a lot of pyramids are that are not in the desert. Now, the ones in Egypt, they're not covered because sand won't stick. It blows and it's gone. But in a lot of places on the planet, they're discovering hills, put that in quotes, hills that have 4 equal triangular sides exactly aligned to north, south, east, and west. And when they begin digging the dirt off, they find that there are pyramids underneath, ancient pyramids. And one of the pyramids in Bosnia, and they think these may be the oldest ones, on the surface of the earth anyway. There's certainly a lot of them underwater as well. But last summer they found a piece of organic material under the dirt but up against the plates that cover the pyramid. And these plates are made out of man-made ceramic. I'm sorry, not ceramic, cement. But it's a lot harder and finer and better quality than anything we know how to make. So this piece of organic material, they don't know exactly what it was, but they carbon dated it at 26,000 years old, which means that the pyramids were covered with dirt, and they believe it was intentional to protect them, about 26,000 years ago. Now, if they had superior technology back then, what does that mean? A lot of people think it means, aliens taught us. But I'm not sure that's true. I'm sure we've interacted with aliens, but I do believe that we had superior technology once upon a time that we don't have anymore. We lost it. And that's addressed in a lot of people's writings, the loss of our memory, actually. If you want to read something about that, there's a really nice book called Nothing in This Book is True, but it's exactly how things are, and the author's name is Phillips. Okay, strange noises in the tunnels. There are tunnels leading toward the Pyramid of the Sun in Bosnia, and they're being excavated, and really interesting things happen there. Okay, so I'm going to read to you about that. The next day I managed to get some long-distance healing sessions and readings done and emailed to my clients. I also figured out nothing worked exactly the same on the computer. I had to make adjustments. Nowadays I can travel and work because I do exclusively remote sessions. I discovered a nice shop under the hotel, bought an Austrian-made kettle with a stunning design for only €10. I purchased it so I could have my green tea in the mornings. And the next morning I did just that. It was delightful. I sat on the edge of a twin bed with the window open, watching the sunrise over the river with the mountains in the distance, and ate a breakfast of packaged salmon, nuts, dates, a nectarine, and some green tea. I placed my food on the wide window ledge of my third-floor room. It was lovely feeling the breeze on my face, watching the sun slowly creep up over the purplish mountains with a soft white mist nestling at their base, with the park and the river in the foreground. I could hear the water flowing in the river as it splashed over large boulders. I had a relaxed, satisfying breakfast. One morning, while eating my breakfast, watching the sunrise, I realized that there was a huge star rising just a bit before the sun did, and almost exactly the same spot. I wondered what it was, and then it hit me. It was August, during what is called the Lion's Gate, and I was seeing the heliacal rising of Sirius, our own sun's twin star. The sun and Sirius rise at that same spot for about 10 days each year, and I was up watching it each morning. I would have jumped up and down squealing for joy, but everybody else was still sound asleep. Each time that I wanted something to eat, I either went to a restaurant or walked to a nearby store. There was no actual restaurant in the hotel. There was a kitchen from which the volunteers were served breakfast and supper, but that year I was not registered as a volunteer. Most people brought some of their own food, or at least supplemented the volunteer fare with things of their own choosing. And at that time, they were serving the volunteers a typical Bosnian breakfast, which looked like lunch to many of us. Cold cuts, cheese and bakery, fresh rolls with butter and jam, herbal tea and coffee were offered as well. Within a few blocks of the hotel, I found several small stores which carried a large variety of things to eat. And in the hotel was a commercial fridge outside the kitchen, which we were allowed to use, so I could put my cheese and fruit and yogurt in there. My milk for the green tea in the morning went there as well. Wisely, I had brought some wild salmon in sealed single-serving foil packages from Target, and some almond butter, too, to keep my protein intake up as high as it needs to be. And no, I'm not a vegetarian in this lifetime. I mastered that discipline in many other lives. The American Indian tribes were a deeply spiritual culture, and they ate meat. They also thanked the spirit of the animals for their sacrifice. I fortunately had a teacher early on in my spiritual studies who explained that after a certain evolutionary point, one is no longer required to avoid eating meat. Self-sacrifice to the human community, including becoming food and clothing, is how animals were said to evolve up the spiral toward becoming human and then, like us, eventually beyond the need to incarnate at all. So I've never stopped eating meat. There was an especially delicious restaurant a few blocks away called Family Food, where for about €4 I could purchase fresh grilled meat, organic vegetables, including a cabbage slaw made with an oil and vinegar marinade, sliced cucumbers, and vine-ripened tomato. They also offered some grilled homemade bread and sour butter. I'm going to scroll on down a bit because we may be running out of time. And I talk about some restaurants and some friends I went with and all that. That night there was an informal gathering in the hotel's small lecture room. The lead archaeologist, Ricardo, and the volunteer archaeologist from New Zealand, Tim, were both quite excited and allowing us to watch what they were doing. Two really interesting objects had been found that day in the newly opened section of the tunnels. First of all, there was a large, roundish rock with some holes in it, which they said was either the end of a stalactite or a stalagmite. Ricardo, however, thought it might be a very old skull with a lot of mineral deposits all over the surface. There seemed to be some iron deposits inside, which indicated blood to him. I'm not sure what it was. One of the Spaniards, a large man in his 30s with a shaved head, made a big show of putting his hand over the rock in different places and twitching and dramatically gyrating his entire body, waving his other arm in the air and wiggling his bottom, looking around to make sure people were looking at him, claiming to be feeling energy coming from the rock. It was all just so exaggerated that it felt like he wasn't really working it to get attention. And maybe he can feel energy. A lot of people can, but mostly he wanted everyone looking at him if he was feeling energy, or so it seemed. Right next to him, the archaeologist Tim was showing us some things on the Internet, and finally in exasperation said to those of us listening to him about the circus act that was going on next to him, "Well, I am so distracted here. I'm a sensitive guy too, you know." And we all cracked up laughing, which was his intention. What he was showing us was a photo online of something exactly like he had found that day in the newly opened section of the tunnel, which Samir, the discoverer of the pyramids, had opened in June. It was a miner's lamp from the 1700s. The hook it was designed to hang from was missing. Just the bottom part was found, the part where the oil would be placed. This find meant that at some point, about 300 years ago or so, someone had been in that part of the tunnel. Of course, that object was today's equivalent of a flashlight, so it did not necessarily mean they were mining in there. They could have been hiding something or hiding from someone, exploring who knows what, maybe even having a romantic tryst. What we do know is that they left behind a small oil-burning lamp made of iron, the kind miners used back then. I was there when he found it, man. It was amazing. It was rather corroded, as one might imagine. I asked him how the people who left the lamp behind could have found their way in there when the tunnels leading to that point were all filled up with stone walls and filler for hundreds of yards. He said they probably got in from another direction. I never thought of that. After that, I went over to where Ricardo, the project's lead archaeologist, was working on his computer. He was getting a little goofy. I think he was tired. Finally, he asked a question to the room in general in a language no one in that room had ever heard of before. And I'm going to skip on down to the next part. Ricardo also said that the prior day, after the volunteers had cleared out and only 2 people were in the tunnels in the newly discovered section, the 2 of them felt a strange vibration and the entire space began to shake. Then they heard a loud, horrifying moaning and growling sound, and he and the other person each said, "Was that you?" Each thought that the other had made the noise. This loud noise occurred several times. No, it was not a person making that noise. Ricardo said it was the most terrifying thing he'd ever heard in his life, and I didn't know what to say, so I just listened. Later, the 2 of them got together. I'm going to explain this to you because it's, let's see. The 2 of them got together, the 2 people who heard that noise, with a translator to make sure that it wasn't a language problem, to discuss the tension that was between them. And that seemed to help calm down the noise in the tunnels. Plus, there was a ritual done by a group of the volunteers, which really helped to calm the energies down. Because we realized that later that the noise was simply, and I got this in meditation in the tunnels, that the noise was simply showing them how their tension between them felt to the energies in the tunnel. And there are lots of energies in those tunnels. And so that's where I'm going to stop for now, since we're about to run out of time. And remind you that these books can be found on Amazon. And just go there and type in my name, Lois Wetzel, in the search engine. And next week, I'm not sure if I'll have a show or not. I'm going to be climbing on Mayan pyramids in the Yucatan with a friend. And when I get back, I'll tell you all about it. So if you want to be notified, you can follow of when I'm going to have my shows. You can follow me on Blog Talk Radio, or you can sign up for my free newsletter. It doesn't come out all that often, so you won't be bombarded. And to do that, go to hotpinklotus.com. And my email address is lois@hotpinklotus.com. Thanks for listening. Bye.